then we are at this point where you can say, why I am a unicorn developer, even if I cannot take care of my design that I want to implement there, and eventually get into the same place where you cannot resolve all of these three issues at the same time. And there is where the cat-like development comes in. It's like the very free creature, very lazy creature, but lazy is not from the way that do not want to do something, but you want to achieve the same goals, but maybe spend a little bit less time on doing that, but still keeping all of those three aspects your way. So how does it look like, and how I call it is laziness driven development, LDD, and it's trademarked, so do not use it that really. I'm joking, of course, but so it's not, as I mentioned, it's not about laziness, it's about finding creative ways. I like to use this word, creative ways, to how to resolve the same issues. And then when you get in the situation when you need to implement the app that needs to resolve all these three issues, you can have all of those, but they come with an asterisk. And this talk is exactly about that, about drawbacks or about choices that you have to make and considerably decide to move on in order to achieve all of those trees at the same time. And we'll start from UI and how to implement beautiful UIs, but the main issue with that is that you cannot really change it. So starting from the very beginning, when you want to implement beautiful UIs, that are snappy, that have beautiful carousels, maybe you want to implement some kind of fancy burger builder where you can, put some bacon, of course, and maybe some pickles. Everyone loves pickles. Yeah, if you want to implement those beautiful things in your apps, the first things that you can do is just using these are only the examples, but just using packages, using animation packages. Flutter Animate is pretty similar because it's relatively lightweight, but you could achieve a lot of staggered effects and a lot of animation things in your apps. Other, helper packages could be built on top of that and then used in combination with each other, and then you can achieve UIs in a pretty beautiful way. The problem with this approach is that if you're lucky enough and you are working in a team that has a designer, then your designer spends some time in Figma or any other design tool implementing designs. Then you spend similar or maybe even more time implementing those in the app, and then you have a product, you have some kind of reusable candidate that you could show to your users. Of course, if you're a unicorn developer, then you need to spend even more time covering these two parts. And I thought maybe there is a better way how to achieve this. Maybe there's a better way where we can cut corners, but achieve the same goals. And this is a thing where your designer spends some time implementing those designs, and you as a developer, in this case cat-like developer, you can sleep and you can do nothing and just basically ship whatever was provided by our designer without you needing to implement this code at all. And this could be easily achieved by Rive. So Rive initially, as I remember the tool when it was just launched, it was a Lottie animation replacement in a way that is the whole editor was built in Flutter and still is built in Flutter, and it's the rendering engine and everything around that is built around Flutter. So it was a recommended approach to replace Lottie animations, I would say. But now Rive as a tool is so powerful that you could have states, you could have responsiveness, you could have localization. I think you could even you have all the physics there that you could use and you could cover. There are like complete games built using just Rive, and by using Rive, the good thing is that you could just could export the asset that you could bring into your app, inject it, and that's it. You do not need to do that much of a development work anymore. So I can show you a few examples. So let's say you're building a personal blog or personal website where you instead of CV, you need to provide information about yourself. So this is the normal site on the right, and it's completely built with Rive. I didn't use any code. I only use code to inject the asset into the app, but that's it. And out of the box, this is, let's say, if you check this Rive animation or Rive view on smaller devices, it's responsive out of the box. It has fancy animations, pretty nice transitions between different states, and it's, as I said, it's completely implemented with Rive. And by the way, this is implemented by Ross, and Ross is my favorite designer, Rive designer, and he posts a lot of good stuff on social media. So check him out. He's amazing. But also, as I mentioned, if you want to implement something more complex, let's say a game, actually in Flutter you can implement this in 12 lines, and that's it. So you just need to inject your Rive animation, select the artboard, which is basically selecting where is your whole view is put in the Rive context, and then selecting the state machine. So for you to be able to control, how you're controlling the Rive view. And now we have a completely working Flappy Bird. Yay! I don't know if you remember, but there were some cases where, okay, I'm not that good anymore, where this game was banned and it wasn't available anymore on the phones. And if you managed to download this game on your phone, you could sell the phone itself for thousands of dollars just because this game was there and it wasn't on App Store anymore. So yeah, you can ship those phones anymore. Just a side gig for you. And lastly, if you want to build complete experience with Rive, that is also possible. Actually, the proof of concept was built by Stacks, the Dane from South Africa, another GD in Flutter. So he built this tool called Expression UI. And the main goal of this UI is to implement your app using Rive, but as well making it more app-ish, if I could say this, because the app could have responsive, it has scrollable views, it has different components. You could have a separate components widgets that are separate Rive files, I would say, and they don't need to be a part of a single Rive file, globally. And also, the most important thing, and basically that's why we build apps, because we want to show data in a more beautiful form. That's basically 80% of the apps out there. So that also, this expression UI experiment manages to sync the data with the Rive views. So basically, if you are loading your data from the database, that could be represented in Rive, and that's actually pretty powerful. And yeah, when I told you that you could build complete experience. So for instance, there's the onboarding flow built completely using Rive, and there's no Flutter code. It just, this expression UI mounts different Rive views. You just use the package, and it just works. So yeah, so the bottom line of this experiment is that you could use Rive animations by your designer. You could limit your work on the app, but if you are not familiar with the Rive itself, the tool itself, you cannot really change there anything, because it's in the hands of a designer, and you should rely on the designer and the provided asset that is there. So yeah, maybe in some cases that could be a pretty fun experiment to do in your apps. Not all apps, but at least for a single view, you could consider that. Now, talking about keeping the high quality code, which was, as you could remember, the second point that you may or may not sacrifice, is we'll talk about that, about high quality code, but it works most of the times, not every single time, but you'll see what I mean by this. I know it sounds terrible, just stay with me. And this section is about state management. Usually, I'm not a fan about talking about state management, because I feel state management is a personal choice. Like, people just use whatever they feel comfortable with. You could achieve the same thing with anything you use, but state management is state management. It's one of those, cursed topics in Flutter community. I will talk about that as well. Why not? So I believe if you have ever built an app, or you built a web application, mobile application, doesn't really matter. You get into the situation where you had this flow. You have some kind of event, button click, asynchronous event, whatnot. Then you need to put the state in progress. Then something happens, and then based on the response that happens on the API side, you either show success or error. Usually, I would ask you to raise hands who came up with this, but I do not see you. But it's fine because I hope that 80-90% of the room raises their hands there. Um, and when you think about this flow, it's pretty funny because companies, enterprises like put huge amounts of money and resources to make their apps and APIs, servers accessible like four nines. There's for four nines accessibility thing where your service is accessible like 99.9999% of the time. So basically, you put tremendous effort to make sure that your services are available, but the first thing that you do in your app is still focus on putting everything in progress state because you're afraid that some error would happen along the way. Maybe there's a better way and more UX friendly way how to solve this. So the first example I showed you is the basic implementation of the loading or any action flow where you put your state into some kind of intermediate in progress state, and then based on the response, you can show the specific result. However, the more UX-friendly approach how you can do this is the optimistic way. So, for instance, if you're implementing, let's take YouTube as a product, and you have a subscribe button. So you know that if you press subscribe, the second state you'll get into is subscribed. You're already subscribed to this. And if if we talk about comments, you are writing the comment pops at the top in the feed. You are liking something, the like button pops up, you liked something. Like most of the times you already know what the next state is, but you are just do not want to rely on APIs. So you first of all, you do the action, wait for the response, and only then change the state. But it means that the UI needs to wait for that response. Then you need to take care of all the in progress states and whatnot, and account that. So optimistic states covers that. So since you know the next state, you put it instead of in progress state, and then doing only later you do the API stuff. API actions, API calls, whatever is needed. On the success of the API call, you do not need to do anything at all because you already put your local state in the next state and you're fine because that's the reality. However, on error, and that's where this problem comes from, and the complexity of this approach is that if something wrong actually happens after you already changed the state, then you need to revert the state to the previous one. And this is flaky, but remember, your server is available most of the time. So maybe if this happens once or twice in your lifetime, that's fine. But you need to, of course, you need to cover that in your app and be prepared. So how does it look like in the simple like approach, like you favorite something or you bookmark something or you like something? So on the left is the basic approach. I press the button, it is in the in progress state, and only after the responses get, you run the animation, it is successful. So this is pretty, basic approach. You put the state in progress, and then you do the API call, and then based on the API response, you put the next state over there. However, optimistic approach is more user-friendly. You press the button, it immediately shows the animation that something happened, and it is because you do not have the in progress state anymore. You immediately show the success, then trigger the API call, and since nothing wrong happened, thankfully, the Mangirdas are with me today. I did nothing else. I mean, I already showed you the success animation, right? But if something could happen, wrong happened, an error, exception, or whatnot, then you need to revert the state and handle it in your UI. So this is a very simple example. If we look at the more complex example, so let's say this is the to-do app where you can, cross out items that are already done. And on the left, there's a basic approach. Please look how that with every action we have some kind of delay because we obviously need to send the request to our servers, to APIs, and do the action. So whichever button I press, there's some kind of delay there, and it is not that snappy that could be with optimistic, because there I can cross items like directly. I can add new ones, delete old ones, and it's just immediate actions. The UX is much better. But now there's a fun part. if we go offline, let's say our API is not accessible anymore. So in our not happy, sorry, basic approach, uh, we at least we do not corrupt the data, because we know that uh, we first of all send the API call, and since we get the error back, we do not corrupt anything, we do not change anything, we just show the snack bar over there that something wrong happened, but we have everything persistent. Now, if we get into the optimistic state, and I deliberately didn't really cover all of the cases, if we run this app pretty fast, we could end up in pretty fun states, that we shouldn't be in. Like, actually, the state should be the same as there, because no actual API calls were handled. But as you see, our states are different, and that's the reality that you should cope with and you should be prepared with when you're using the optimistic approach. So the drawback is that, okay, I can show you actually in the next slide. So the drawback is that on the optimistic side, you need to implement much more code to make sure that you revert to the last state properly, no data is corrupted, and everything is up to date. In the basic state, of course, you do not need to cover that, because when the error or success happens. But yeah, the drawback is that the user experience is not that friendly. You need to cover all the in progress states and everything that revolves around that. So just something to consider, that if you want snappier experience, that could be your option to implement in your apps. And this approach is nothing new. Like the use optimistic hook is available in React in web world since the version of 19, and actually even so it was like this. I presented this talk in Flutter Con 2024, I think. And after 2 months or so, the Flutter docs released actually this optimistic state documentation, which was pretty fun, because if it was released previously, I wouldn't probably cover this topic anymore, because it's there in the documentation. It's not that fancy anymore. But yeah, this is the official documentation of how to achieve this optimistic state management in Flutter docs. And yeah, we can move to the last section about the speed, about development speed, how you can achieve greater results faster, but also how you could at the same time confuse your users. So nothing new nowadays. If we are working in companies and startups, some kind of hyped CEO or PM gets to the team and says, okay, we need to implement something new. We really, really need to implement the AI feature, because that's how we should go. As a developer, you're a bit suspicious of this thought, because do we really need this? Like, would people actually use this or not? Like, we didn't even test this out. We just is it worth to invest a lot of time and ship feature and then notice that no one is using it? So, of course, is there a better approach? The answer is yes. And there are many approaches, but I will only cover a single approach that could be used in this kind of situation. And this is the fake door testing. I don't know if you are familiar with this term, but basically fake door testing is when you are putting the facade in front of the user, like button, new feature, but under the hood, this feature does not have any actual implementation. It does not have any logic. The only logic that is there is only analytics that the user expressed the interest to use this feature. And now why the fake door testing is even useful is, especially if you are working in startup environment, there's a saying that 90% of things that you will do will be thrown away because that won't be used. So that's, the feeling is the same as taking a pile of spaghetti and throwing them to the wall, and only some of them will stick. And that's how products and startups are built. You just need to find your product market fit. You need to implement features that are actually used by your users, and that's how you approach this. So you're just it. Eventually, if it's happening 90% of the time, it doesn't really matter if you actually implement the full feature and ship it as a whole and spend months on implementing that, or you are just shipping the fake door testing that you could implement in week or two, and you will face the same reality in the end. but no, that you should take that with a grain of salt, as I told you, because some features, would be used by your users, and you know that. So you do not need fake testing, fake door testing for those, because that's what your product revolves around. But if you want to just to try things, whether you are questioning whether this is actually needed, you can consider using other approaches, and one of those is fake door testing. So fake door testing is usually implemented together with feature toggles, because fake doors clutters your UI. So imagine if you're running multiple fake door tests in parallel, and you just have a bunch of fake buttons across your app, and your users just get frustrated and they do not want to use your product anymore. So usually it is recommended to only run a single fake door experiment at a time. And in order to hide it or run it, usually you're using feature toggles. So you could, launch the experiment and remotely disable this feature when you get enough results and enough insights on that feature, or fake door in this case. So this is very easily implemented in Firebase Remote Config. I always recommend using it in your apps because, first of all, this service is free and it is reliable, and you could use feature toggling. You could also use any other remote config operations that you want to. You can build A/B tests on top of that, and as I mentioned, it is free. It is automatically connected with the Google Analytics, so it just really works in those situations, especially fake doors in this case. So you could run the experiment using Firebase Remote Config. And how does it looks like is that you get the feature flag value, and based on that you either show the button or show nothing, and the empty view. And inside the button, as I mentioned, there's no logic behind it. That your only logic is just to collect analytics data and to see if your user is using the feature or not. So for instance, if you want to implement the export to PDF feature in some kind of Google Sheet-ish application, you can add this button, the user clicks it, and instead of the actual feature, you show this you show a model screen, or you show a snack bar, or in some kind of different way you manage this and just notify your user that something happened. In this case, we thank the user, we collected the information, we appreciate your feedback, and once you get enough feedback, once you get enough signals from your users, then you can actually move on and actually implement this feature in your applications. So we covered those three. I don't know how we are on time, and if no one will stop me, I'll tell you a short bonus story that's also revolves around cat-like development. And this is about faking the UI in order to ship the features that matter faster. So I have a very bad relationship with app reviews, especially Apple app reviews. Sometimes these reviews take hours, 1-2 days, that's fine. But I was where in the situations where it took like 2 weeks, 3 weeks in order for the app to get approved, and everything just stops you from shipping features. And when you are in a rush, you really want to deliver them. It happens, and one of those times was when our app was rejected out of nowhere, because login actually was our first feature in our app that was implemented with the first release of the app. And then after a few months or even a year, we got a rejection because of login, saying that you are asking by using Apple login, you are asking for the user's name and email, even though you get this information from Apple sign in. So how does it looks like? So if you open the app and you do this for the first time, these fields of the first name, last name, and email gets actually pre-filled, and it works well. But if somehow you cancel this sign-up process, you got back, you close the app, and we didn't persist this information, the second time when you're using the sign-in with Apple, these fields are not pre-filled anymore. And obviously, Apple says it's a bug. And we thought this as well, as long as I realized that's a feature and not a bug, because the official approach of Apple, and it's in the docs, it says that, yeah, we just provide this information only for the first time, and if you do not persist it, it's basically your fault, and we do not provide this information anymore. So yeah. So it's a bug, but it's a bug by them actually. Um, and the fun thing, if you have quite extensive analytics, you could see what the app reviewers see in your app when they are reviewing their app or the new version of your app. And we realized that our viewers, because Apple famously use third-party services and reviewers from other countries who gets a lot of apps in their account, and they take care of them and they review that bucket of apps, if I can put it this way. So we realized that they do not get through the sign up screen ever. They just reach the sign up screen, they either see the bug or not, and they just cancel and they say, okay, your app is fine, or they say, okay, your app is not working. And then, I had an idea. Can we get over this? And can we really fake the information in order for our app to get approved? Then we get some time for the bug to be fixed, to handle this persistence. But as long we, but yeah, but we won't get rejected, so we could ship our actually useful features to our users. So I used Firebase Remote Config. Okay, allegedly, maybe it's not me, maybe it's hypothetical situation. So implementing feature flag that we is this a new app version of not? So feature flags or these toggles in Firebase Remote Config, they have some kind of smart feature called conditions. And there you could create conditions when this feature flag will be on. So I created a condition which is true only for the app version that is being released. So meaning if this is the app version that is in the hand of the app reviewer, they'll get this true value. For all the app versions, that will be false, and we won't fake anything. It will be just properly working app. So how does it look like in the hands of the app reviewer? So we submit the app. We still didn't fix this issue. Okay, so just have this in mind. Now, since this is the app version that will be released soon, the feature toggle becomes on, and we do not see this bug anymore. Yeah, the app is fixed. Then we wait for the review. We get this success message that app review was approved. And then since the app is released, this feature toggle becomes off. We still have this bug, but at least our app is approved. And we consider that this bug shouldn't really block us from actually shipping useful features. So we just do this workaround. Of course, we fix this issue a few months later, because it was just properly fix this and that's it, and do not fake anything else. But yeah, at least it saved us some time, and the initial releases had some features that matter. This presentation is available on my blog on kazlauskas.dev/LDD, and you could find all the other presentations there as well. I'm talking quite often about technical Flutter talks, so maybe some content will be useful for you. And thank you for you all. Even though I do not see you, I hope that's useful, and I hope that's something that will bring out of this event. Thank you. And if you have any questions, please let me know, either in the chat or live. Yeah, however.
Thank you, Mangirdas.
Thank you.
Any questions? I have one, actually. So if I understand correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, the way that you kind of bypassed App Store review is by using a feature flag.
Mm-hmm.
Is it something that it's it's recommended? Is it allowed? Or
no.
Go ahead.
Okay, it's a gray line. I would recommend it because you would save some time for you and for your team to ship features. That's recommended. Is it recommended by Apple? Actually, you could get a ban from Apple. I know cases where like these kind of workarounds cause some profiles to be suspended. Let's say, let's use this friendly word. It is not recommended, but yeah, feature flagging is like industry standard. People, teams, enterprise are using this really extensively, but it's still up to you as a developer on how you use them. In our case, we use it this way. It's legal, but it's not recommended. Let's put it this way.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I also wanted to ask you, because I think you touched an important point about product engineering and
Mhm.
some cool concepts. I don't remember exactly the word that you use, but like the fake wall technique, let's say.
Fake door testing. Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. How would you define a product engineer in your view, and how does it differ from a traditional software engineer, if we want to say that?
Oh, that's a very good question. So, okay, so I think the product engineer, and the main advantage of being, or having product engineers as your team, is that product engineer is not only a good software engineer, but also these kind of engineers have a lot of context about the business where they are in. So if you are working in a startup environment, in some kind of, I know, finance, or some kind of B2B business, if you're a good engineer, that's fine, as long as you have good product managers, good designers around you. They will take care of all the business stuff for you. You'll get a task, you'll just implement it, and that's enough to be a software engineer. However, product engineer, once they get a task from product manager, they could say, do we really need to ship this? Maybe there's a better approach. I have enough context how we can achieve the same goal of this feature, but maybe 3 times faster. And if you are, in a small teams, I don't know, it's pretty difficult to have this kind of impact when you're working in enterprises or bigger teams. But if you're working in startup, in small teams, and especially small startups have a single R&D or engineering team, where all of you, like designers, PMs, engineers, QA engineers, and whatnot, they are in a single team. So it's much easier to bring this knowledge and bring this approach to these small teams and make this impact. um, I don't think, because nowadays I see that more and more companies require engineers to be product centric, and I believe it's not really fair, because that should be your choice, whether maybe you're just completely fine of implementing what's needed, and that's it, going back home, spending your evening, and that's it. But for companies, they see, especially small companies, because resources are very limited, you can even get a higher salary, and they could not require, but they could put more product knowledge on you as an engineer, and you could bring more value to these kind of companies. So I know, for some engineers like that, some don't. So I do not want to advocate for that. But in my case, yeah, I'm doing a lot of product engineering stuff, implementing feature, building data dashboard around it, getting into the interviews with users, how they are using this new feature, collecting feedback. It's just, it's fun in their own way.
Very, very interesting. And do you think that Flutter is a good stack for product engineer?
I mean, that's how I got into this, so I think it's the best stack for that. In my case, um, overall, I think stack does not really define you and how you approach that. Flutter, sure, iOS engineer, Android, they could be also product-centric engineers. Flutter, maybe it just makes easier, at least what we notice with Flutter and other cross-platform frameworks, honestly, is that more and more indie developers emerged, like developers who building their own businesses. And if you're building your own business, you are bootstrapping it. I mean, there's no choice but just to be a product engineer, because you are building the business around it and there's no one else around you. So you are a product engineer out of the box. So if we put it this way, then yes, it's a great stack for that.
Amazing, amazing. I totally agree with you. I also started Flutter and doing a lot of product, and I think it brings us closer to the customers because of the fast iteration and because it's obviously front end. But yeah, very interesting. I have one last question. If nobody wants to ask, what's your favorite state management?
Oh, you. Um, it's not favorite, but it's the most. It is the one that I use the most is Block, just because of legacy things. Because I used Block even before there was a block package by Felix. Like it was just a idea of how you could handle your state. So it was early 2018, I would say. So we have the block approach, but we didn't have package for that. So I used block for this reason. But now if you check like my open source work or whatnot, I'm using basically nothing. I'm just using whatever Flutter provides, value notifier, change notifier. It just works for similar for small cases. Yeah, it's fine. So, but again, that's just using whatever's comfortable. For me, it's block because I know block in and out, so it's just easy for me to use it. What's yours?
Makes sense. Yeah, I don't work with Flutter recently for the past few years, but before that it was Block as well. Although I do not have a strong argument of why using it, apart from just knowing the ins and outs, as you said. What I find interesting is also the use of vanilla techniques, like a change notifier, as you said.
Mhm.
And it's a trend that I see recently coming up. Also, we had a speaker in another event that built a very famous Estonian application. It's called Lightyear. It's a financial app, very complicated. And he said that he's not using any state management library. So it was a bit surprising to me at that time, but now I see more and more people doing that, and it's interesting.
Yeah, I think especially if you're working alone, not using anything for state management works pretty fine. But what I notice is when more and more people contribute to your code or you're working in a team, then you need to introduce something just because it brings the architectural clarity for the whole team of what should be expected in state management. If if the team is using block, everyone is aware of what needs to be implemented, how and where, and how it should be tested. But if there won't be any approach, then that would be Wild West, and that could end up in pretty complex state of your app. So if you're working alone, just using anything or using nothing, both options are fine. But if you're working in bigger teams, I noticed that using something just for the sake of being consistent with that, it actually helps. So maybe that's something to put into consideration for teams or for those people who are working not as a single developer on the project.
Yeah, definitely. Very interesting. Mangirdas, thank you so much again, and we wait for you in Tallinn next time. Come visit us.
Just tell me time and location, and that's it.
Amazing. All right, another round of applause for Mangirdas.
Bye bye. Have fun.
And